Hello everyone, my name is Mark Wedge, and welcome to the Wedge Adjustment. This is the post-Texas show leading up to the Southern 500 at Darlington, and it happens to be the third show that we've done. Now, if you notice, there was no show last week after the Martinsville race, and there's a very good reason for that, and that is that I live in a region of the country where the pollen gets really bad this time of year, and I have bad allergies, and my voice was torn to shreds by allergies. So, it's better now. I'm back this week, and sorry for missing out on 1 week, but Wedge Adjustment is back, and it should be a weekly thing, barring any other unfortunate circumstances with my voice, because that's obviously something that I need to do this. So I want to start out the show by talking about the winners and losers at Texas. Obviously, Joey Logano won, and he's the big winner of the day, but there are a lot of drivers that had a very good day, and a lot of drivers who improved their standing so far in 2014. It's been a very good season for racing. There's 7 races so far, 7 different winners. So if you were tired of, the Jimmy Johnson and Matt Kenseth show last year, there's a fix for that this season. We've not had a repeat driver. However, there have been some comers and goers, teams that have been strong and then fallen off, and vice versa, teams that were really bad at the beginning and are now kind of finding their stride. But before we get into that and kind of break that down, I want to talk about one team that, in my opinion, has been the most consistent in 2014, even on weeks that you could say were off weeks, where things went bad, things didn't go quite their way. This team was still able to handle it and come away with a finish, and they're now the points leaders, and that would be the 24 team, Jeff Gordon, the driver. Now, Jeff has had a lot of troubles ever since the Generation 5 car was unveiled, partly because I think he never really got accustomed to the handling of it, and last year with the Gen 6 car being introduced, it still handled a lot like the Generation 5 car. But the new rules package this year, drivers are commenting that the cars are handling better, they're more like the Generation 4 car, and obviously Gordon was very successful with that generation of car. Now, he hasn't won a championship since 2001, and many are saying that this might be the best year for him to change all that, and he's certainly showing that he has an opportunity, leading the points for the first time since the Coca-Cola 600 in 2009. So it's definitely a marked improvement on the 24 team's part. And also working in their favor, the next race is at Darlington, which has always been a very good track for Jeff Gordon. But we'll talk more about that when we look at our picks for this upcoming race, and when I basically give you a hint as to who I'm going to pick for the Admin Championship, as I always do. So Gordon and Logano were the obvious winners from this past weekend. They finished first and second, with Logano edging out Gordon on the final lap with a pass, and tires were the difference. Jeff had 2 new ones, Logano had 4, and the 24 team made a gamble, taking 2 tires on that pit stop that got them track position, knowing that they probably couldn't hold off an assault from the 22, and obviously they couldn't, but they got a second place finish out of it, which is better than they would have done had they not gambled that way. So who are the other winners from Texas? Well, I think you can also look at the 5 team, Casey Kane. They've had a dismal season. They have had so many finishes in the 20s or worse, and it's not been the same Casey Kane that we saw last season. And I want to kind of make that more specific and say the first half of last season, because the second half of last season, they saw a lot of troubles, kind of like we're seeing them do now. But this weekend was not so bad for the 5 team. They didn't finish in the top 10, but they were in 11th, so they were as good as you can get without finishing in the top 10. And even though that's an 11th place finish, it's not really great statistics-wise. It's still better than they've been doing. And any improvement like that I see, I'm going to say that's a step forward for that team. I think the 5 team is going to be one of those comers later in the season, because what we've seen so far just isn't characteristic of Casey Kane or any Hendrick Motorsports team. I mean, I'll be honest with that. Hendrick has a reputation for being the best, and what we've seen out of the 5 team has not been the best so far. They can do a lot more, and I think Texas was a step in the right direction for them, if not the finish that they wanted. Now, somebody else that I thought was a winner, and this is no surprise, he's done pretty well this season so far, was Kyle Larson, the rookie. In his season-long battle for Rookie of the Year against Austin Dillon, he struck a blow this weekend, placing 5th. So this is 2 top 5s now for the 42 car. One at Fontana, placing second, and then one here at Texas. And it's interesting because these are the tracks that have the 2 oldest pavements. They haven't been repaved in longer than any of the other tracks. So I'm thinking Kyle Larson is going to be pretty good at Atlanta too, because that's a track that's known for a lot of character, a lot of age in the pavement. Kentucky similarly is very bumpy, has a lot of character in the pavement. So keep an eye on Larson at those tracks going forward. But obviously he's displaying some very, very good talent and very good ability so far in this season as a rookie. And the other driver that I think was a winner this weekend was Brian Vickers in the 55. New team for Michael Waltrip Racing. He came in this season. They brought him up from the Nationwide Series. He's been okay. He hasn't been stellar, but he got a 4th place finish at Texas. So any top 5 is good for a new team. I think we're going to see the 55 pull off a win here before too long. And at the rate we're going, there are going to be a lot of drivers that are winning races this season. There's already 7. And remember, 16 is the cutoff for the chase. So at the rate we're going, the playoff situation is not going to be as cut and dry as you win a race and you're in. I think we're going to see the chase be a little more complicated, and I think this new format is going to be made that much more interesting because this rule package has made the racing so much more competitive, and because drivers are able to do so much more with their cars during a race. There's more responsibility on the drivers versus the setup, and this has resulted in 7 winners in 7 races. So keep in mind, 16 is the magic number, the magic cutoff. Once we get to 16 winners, that was supposed to be the 16 drivers that are going to be in the chase. But we'll see if something other than wins is going to come into play when we determine which drivers are going to compete for the championship come the last 10 races. So who were the losers at Texas? I've said the winners. Now let's take a look at the guys who did not have a great day. And I first got to point the finger at Stewart-Haas Racing because Kevin Harvick had another mechanical problem. Kurt Busch had a tire issue, which wasn't really the team's fault. But these are 2 teams that have been just plagued with issues that start at the shop. I think part of the problem is it's a 4-car team, and it's maybe not an organization that's fully equipped yet to deal with a 4-car lineup. I know Tony Stewart was pretty concerned about that when Gene Haas announced Kurt Busch was coming along. So that might be the root of the problem here. But in the meantime, you have 2 of NASCAR's best drivers, one who's a former champion, one who's done everything except win a championship, and who is a driver, by the way, that a lot of people think this could be his year. And they can't do anything because their cars don't work. I mean, they're fast cars. They show a lot of strength before the engines blow or whatever problem it is. And then that happens and they get taken out. Harvick qualified 3rd at Texas, and he took the lead pretty quickly from his teammate Tony Stewart. He had one of the best cars, if not the best car, there at Texas, in my opinion, from what little we saw of it anyway, the little amount of information we have to judge that. And he got taken out because of a mechanical failure. And it's a problem that they've had in pretty much every race since Phoenix. Now, Phoenix was week 2. That was the 2nd race of the season. And here we are 5 weeks later, just finished race 7. And it's been a consistent problem. It hasn't been every race, but it's been the vast majority of races that these excellent cars have been taken out. Now, they both have 1 win. Kurt Busch and Kevin Harvick both have 1 win. But they can't compete consistently because their cars keep having issues. And Harvick's now approaching being in danger of dropping out of the top 30. So I really hope they get this issue fixed before that becomes a problem, and before we see him drop all the way back to where there are teams that just don't have a lot of funding and can't put good cars out. Because he has great cars, week in and week out, but they just have mechanical malfunctions every time. Now, the other 2 losers that I would point out for this, well, I don't want to say loser, that's kind of mean. The other 2 drivers that didn't have the greatest day at Texas were Jimmy Johnson and Dale Earnhardt Jr. Jr. obviously had that mistake on that restart, I think it was, where he ran into the grass following the 43, and the car went up into the wall, caught fire, because you can't drive a car that's set that low to the ground over grass. It's disastrous, just like we saw. And Jimmy Johnson, his teammate, happened to be the unfortunate soul behind all of this, and the debris cracked his windshield, damaged the car, and they repaired it. He was able to get a 25th place finish, but really not what he was going for. So those would be the drivers that had issues at Texas. Those are the winners and the losers. Again, I don't want to be mean by saying losers, so the drivers that had some trouble. So where does that leave us going into the Bojangles Southern 500 this weekend at Darlington Raceway? Well, it leaves us with Jeff Gordon in the points lead for one. It leaves us with Dale Jr. having dropped back to 6th, I believe, in the points after his 43rd place finish at Texas. It leaves us with the 48 car still hungry for that first win. And it leaves us with Stuart Haas Racing with a giant question mark over their entire operation. Because even though they've been able to put outstanding equipment out on the track from a performance standpoint, there's always something that goes wrong with the cars. So for the Admin Championship this week, we're obviously hoping for a better week than we had last week because all 3 of our drivers had terrible days. Jimmy Johnson got the best finish, so Matt made out like a bandit compared to what happened to my points and Reggie's points. But any weekend where we can't put a driver in the top 20, that's obviously not a great weekend. So at Darlington, we're hoping to turn things around and get back on track to where we were calling the winner every week for the first 2 races. That was nice. That was nice, those first 2 races, when we called Dale Earnhardt Jr. in the 500 and Kevin Harvick at Phoenix. So who am I picking this week? I'm not even going to give you a range of possibilities. I've got it down to 1 driver already. Jeff Gordon. He's great at Darlington. He's the points leader. He's been robbed of a win a couple times. Texas, of course, was the most recent, but also at Fontana. A late caution prevented him from getting a win. I think he is in prime position to get a win in the Southern 500. The car is handling like the old car. He was great at Darlington with the old car. The Southern 500 was one of his best events. So watch the 24 this weekend. That's what I'm going to be picking. No question about it. So I am all out of time for this episode of the Wedge Adjustment. Mark Wedge here, NASCAR Nation blog. Please share the blog with your friends. Give us a shout on Facebook. Comment on anything you want me to talk about. And thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, I will see you at the racetrack.